spirituality, and realizing our infinite potential. Mucho, mucho love and light. Hello, infinite souls. How are y'all doing? Welcome again to another episode. Happy Tuesday. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Cinnamon Denise. She is amazing, talented singer, songwriter, music producer, bassoonist, and yoga teacher, amongst many other things, I'm sure. Say hi, Cinnamon.
Hi, infinite souls. How are y'all doing today?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love it. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Thank you so Yes. So, why don't you tell the infinite souls out there a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Okay. When people ask me this question, I'm always like, should I start from when I was born? No. No, I'm not going to start from when I was born.
When you were conceived.
Right. I'm like, when I was brought into this physical plane. Okay. So,
yes.
I am from Atlanta, Georgia, but I do currently reside in Austin, Texas. I've studied music for a very long time, maybe since I was like 8 or 9 years old. I started singing very young. My mom was a gospel choir director, and I will say she forced me to sing. And I was very shy, and I didn't really like being, on stage or doing any of that stuff. And I would say around like maybe 10 or 12 is when I started really enjoying music. More than anything before that, I was just copying my sister, who was also a musician. And I started realizing that I was good at it. And I started like practicing more and just learning more about it. And so around middle school, I had played clarinet up until then. And then I started playing the bassoon. And I can say I really knew early on that I wanted to study music in college or for the rest of my life. And my mom was just kind of like, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm 100% sure. And then she said, well, if you want to study this in college, you're going to have to get a scholarship. So you got to play an instrument that no one's heard of. So I started playing. Yes, I started playing the bassoon. And I had never heard of the bassoon before either, but my band teacher and my mom were talking, and my mom kind of told her that. And the band director was just like, oh, okay, she should play the bassoon then. And my teacher found me a bassoon, and I started playing and taking lessons, and fell in love with the sound and everything. And I continued playing all throughout high school and doing things like in the state of Georgia, various like cities and that sort of thing. And I did get a scholarship to go to college. And I went to University of Miami and studied like music production. And from there, I did study at Berklee College of Music, and that was actually in Spain for a little while. And kind of tying it all together, when I was doing an internship after school in Ibiza at a music studio, that's when I started practicing yoga. And I can kind of say that it started out, I was doing a lot of like couch surfing because I was always traveling. So my back was always hurting. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to have to stretch or something. I was doing a lot of running. I would do like very long distance running, and maybe like 4 or 5 times a week I was running, 6, 7, 8 miles. And that's a lot on your body and a lot on your back and stuff, compressing the spine. So I started doing more stretching, because this is the age when like you exercise without stretching. It's when you're like,
oh, I know.
You're like, this is now I'm like, that was a horrible idea. And now there's no way I could work out without stretching, right? So,
yes.
I started actually stretching before and after my runs. And I'd say like after a week, I did notice a very big difference in my back. So I was like kind of hooked to it.
Mm-hmm.
I started, just with like videos on YouTube, and I didn't really start with like the intense yoga. It was maybe like 10, 12, 15 minutes a couple days out the week. And then from there, I just kind of started realizing like this internal shift. I really struggled and struggle with like mental issues, and kind of going on this journey of discovering where my anxiety is coming from, and kind of just continue with yoga. Now, I will say that I did stop yoga like for 1 year. And this is when I was really going through a lot of mental struggles, which if you want, we can talk about.
Yeah.
But I was really going through some mental struggles, and I stopped anything and everything related to self-care, physical care, emotional, mental care. It all stopped for about a year.
Wow.
And eventually I finally kind of got back up with the help of a lot of supportive friends and family, and started practicing again. I've been practicing ever since. So since 2015 till now, so it's about 7 years or 6 years, going on 7. Minus, I guess, that 1 year, but we can talk about that. So
Minus
6 years.
2020.
Right, exactly.
That 1 year.
Minus that 1 year, but I don't know. So yeah. And I just, I kind of started practicing really on my own, right? Like I said, I didn't go to a yoga class for the first 3 years of my practice. And when I did go to a yoga class, I felt, I don't know, I really didn't like it, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't. And and I just kind of continued with my own practice. So a lot of the things where people are, going to classes or taking private classes or that sort of thing, I was doing a lot of it just on my own because I just loved it.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a little bit of my story.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. That's a beautiful, beautiful story. Oh my gosh. So you come from a family of musicians. Your family, they're into music. They sing as well?
Yeah. So my mom sings, right? So really, my mom was an athlete in her like teens and early adulthood. She was All-American softball player. And then, she actually joined the military, which is where she met my father, who's also in the military, in the Army. And once she had my sister and I, so my sister is older, my mom always wished that she was more in the arts rather than sports. So she made it her life mission that we were going to be musicians. And I really looked up, to my sister. So my sister started playing, when she was maybe like 10. And she's 5 years older than me. So I was maybe 5 or 6. And I always wanted to be like her. So I just that was just the natural path for me. Now, my dad, he's not a musician, but he will sing his heart out. He's not a great singer either, but you can feel the passion when he's singing. Yes. For sure. So, so that's kind of more so. I don't know if I'm from a family of musicians or we just are we just love music. So.
Yeah, you just love music, and that's amazing. It runs in your family. Liking music and feeling it in your blood definitely runs in your family, regardless if you're not professionals. But that's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. So, I do want to ask you one question, kind of like an icebreaker that I ask everyone.
Sure.
And that is, what are you grateful for?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So. This week, this is really like timely, right? So I'm really grateful for, I'm grateful for good health and like really holistic health. And on top of that, I actually started working with a dietitian, and that really changed my life. and my relationship with food. It was almost like, for me, food was my comfort, and like food can be comforting, right? But food was kind of like my coping. And my dietitian, she did more so like diet therapy, right? So she helped me understand where those emotions are coming from, and not having like these guilty feelings around food. And that has really changed my life, and given me a very different perspective. So I'm grateful for those two things.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing what you're grateful for. I'm grateful to have you on today. And I want to, so I heard you talking about your yoga and your mental health, and how yoga really helped with your mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
so my question is, how did it help you? Because we all struggle, I think, with a little bit of mental health issues, just if you want to call them issues, but
Mm-hmm.
because just by default, by being human, we naturally go through experiences that can be traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And you know through this type of things, they pass on through lifetimes, I believe. That's
Mm-hmm.
for my beliefs. I believe that other lifetimes we have had other probably traumatic events and things like that that cause us to have anxiety in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how did yoga help? I know yoga is very spiritual, not just physical, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh gosh.
Mouthful.
So I know it's a lot. So when I first started practicing yoga, I was very focused on the physical practice. And I think I think from that, the intensity of my like physical practice kind of forced these things that I was kind of suppressing out, like spirit, like my emotional kind of distress and my spiritual distress. So I think that kind of, whether I realized it or not, like forced it out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
and I'm talking about like that year where I was no longer practicing. um it's like, I did start going to a psychiatrist, and I was diagnosed with depression. And then shortly thereafter, I was actually in a mental hospital for a while. And while there, it was almost like I was kind of like, how do you call it? Disassociating, right? From like my body, from the things around me.
Yeah.
And short term, like long story short, I'm not going to make this about diagnoses or anything like that. But I actually had bipolar disorder, which is commonly diagnosed as depression first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And along with that, of course, anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so went back to the mental hospitals. I've been twice, so I have no shame about it anymore.
No shame here.
No shame about it. And once I got out the second time, I kind of realized that I have to kind of change certain things. I started working actually with a therapist, which was really even more helpful than anything the psychiatrist gave me. So the therapist made me realize how much anger and frustration and like just disappointment I had in myself and things around me. And so I started practicing yoga again very slowly, because it's like you're rebuilding your physical practice. And from doing that, I began to realize kind of what bipolar disorder was and is for me. I think, like you said, I also believe the same thing. Like, I think there's trauma from previous lifetimes, and if you don't work on them in your lifetime, they're going to keep progressing forward. So I think through yoga, Source was kind of like telling me to really like tap into the distress or pain. And because I was rebuilding from a place of essentially very poor physical health, right? So when I first started, I was in good physical health, and yoga was just it was easy to pick up. But when I started from poor physical health and poor self-image, it was even more of a journey than it was before. And it kind of took this certain level of like seeing, seeing what you don't see, right? So believing that that things are changing, even if you can't see them. And that was more humbling than the first, I don't know, stint of my practice. And that's just where, I don't know, just this awareness of self and realizing like how divine I really am. And that has like helped me day to day.
I love that. Yes, you are divine. I love it. Thank you for that beautiful story. Thank you for sharing and letting us in a little bit. You know, it takes a lot to be vulnerable, and I commend you for that, you know.
Thank you.
And you know, a lot of you know, I feel like a lot of people get diagnoses, you know. I know you don't, we're not going to talk about diagnoses.
Exactly.
Because, you know, sometimes I feel like a lot of people are diagnosed incorrectly, you know. And the more I learn about spirituality and different types of spiritual practices and spiritual development as far as your psychic gifts, I see that what it can look like psychosis, but in reality, it's just you awakening your ability, your natural abilities.
Child, don't get me started on that.
Oh yes, child. Okay, we'll hop on another episode for that.
Yes, I'm right there with you. Like you said, you know, with the psychosis, they're like, oh, you're seeing things that aren't there. And I'm like, no, there's definitely a spirit here.
Yes.
You know, you just don't see the same spirit, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean that what I'm experiencing or seeing is not real. So
yes, exactly. Yeah, it's very real. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for saying that. So I do want to get into the types of yoga. I know there are so many. I personally am only familiar with vinyasa and pranayama, and the Western typical yoga that everyone does. Not the hot yoga. I haven't tried that. But I think that might be a little too intense for now. Maybe in the future. But yes, please tell us about the types of yoga. What are your favorite?
Yeah. Okay. So, there are so many types of yoga. So many types. We can start with vinyasa. So,
how many types of yoga do you think there are? Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're fine. At least over 100.
Oh my gosh.
So many types. Wow. So many types. So, okay, so vinyasa, I'll talk just a little bit about some of my favorites, right? So vinyasa is one of my favorite, and it's actually a very good place to start when you're very much into like physical health, right? It's a good place to start because it doesn't require as much like meditation and just focus because you're doing so much movement, right? Some of the other types of yoga are you're holding longer, which we'll talk about some of those. But vinyasa is always moving. And essentially a vinyasa is also considered like a flow, right? So vinyasa is where you're transitioning from pose to pose. There's no breaks between the poses. So you're just going from pose to pose and constantly moving and having this flow in your body and moving the energy like through the movement. And depending on the teacher, right, it can be very fast moving. It can be a little bit like medium pace, but vinyasa is very rarely slow moving. And so vinyasa is a type of hatha yoga, right? We'll talk about hatha. So hatha yoga is it's essentially like slower moving vinyasa is how I like to think of it. So you may hold the poses longer. Hatha yoga is focusing on this balance of like feminine and masculine, or left and right, hot and cold. So when you're practicing hatha, like for example, I'm trying to think of a pose, like for a downward facing dog, right? So in hatha yoga, you're thinking about extending through the arms and shoulders and pushing down through the feet, right? So it's almost like you're working on these opposing forces, essentially, in hatha yoga. And so you have to kind of move a little slower because you have to be able to focus on that. And then Iyengar yoga is, like you said, prior to us hopping on, is really about alignment. So not all types of yoga have like props. So this is the type of yoga where you'll see people using like straps and blocks and anything that's going to allow you to align the spine and keep from compressing the spine and like tensing the shoulders is typically going to be Iyengar yoga. And then with Nidra, sorry, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. What was the name of that one again?
Iyengar. That's Iyengar.
Oh, okay. Amazing. Yeah. I really like working with my spine because I have back problems sometimes. Oh my gosh. And what's the other ones that you really like? Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off again.
No, you're good. No, you're good. You're good. So then there's also Nada yoga. So this one is really beautiful because Nada yoga is the yoga of sound. So this is really where you're like allowing music, or it can be, right, like sound baths or anything like that. You're just allowing the sound to kind of like encapsulate you and focus on how the vibrations are affecting you. Oh. Yes, Nada yoga is amazing.
So it's kind of like it's like having a sound bath, basically.
Exactly.
Wow. And are you doing any movements at all, or just taking in the sound?
No.
Wow,
you're just kind of sitting there or laying down, or you can do it standing, but it's usually long, right? It can be like hours or maybe a long time to stand. But yeah, so sound bath can be like a Nada yoga. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, I'm learning.
Yes. And then there's also yoga Nidra, right? So Nidra is like a yogic sleep. It's, you do it laying down for sure. And a teacher is going to kind of talk you through, it's essentially like this place between meditation and being asleep. So it's kind of hard to explain. You really just have to experience it, honestly. And then you'll get what I mean.
I want.
Yeah, that one's really nice. And then the last one that I really love is Kundalini, right? So this one is like really tied to mental like health. So in Kundalini yoga, the belief, right, is that you have essentially this coiled snake at the bottom of your spine, or kind of like in your root chakra. And when your Kundalini is awakened, it's like this huge spiritual enlightenment. It's like this power surge of enlightenment, really. So the symptoms of Kundalini are most times psychosis, depression, like sometimes rage, irritability. So with the Kundalini rising, you have to learn how to kind of discipline it because it's very powerful energy. And it's a really beautiful experience. And it's not just like you go to a class and now your Kundalini is awakened, right? It's like years of practicing.
That I know. Oh my God. I actually took a Kundalini class, Kundalini yoga class the other day. So I'm glad that you mentioned it. It was my first time and I loved it. It was I was freaking sweating from every part.
Yes.
And I wasn't, and you know, like, okay, for the listeners, like, I was sweating not because I was moving my body. It was breath work that I was doing. I was breathing, and that was putting energy and light into my body, waking up that chi, you know. And that just it's definitely a different feeling. You definitely get a high, a yoga high.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh. And so the way that, so there's so many ways to do yoga or different practices of yoga, and primarily, would you agree that it focuses mainly on the breath for most of the practices?
Most of like the physical practices, you mean?
Yeah.
Um, yes. Yes and no. So
Okay.
so the breath is what grounds you, right? And then the change, like the internal transformation, is like the fire inside, right? So people, like when your muscles are burning, or when you're sweating, when you're sore the next day, right? That's still kind of like the embers of the fire from your practice, like burning in you, right? So the breath is what allows you to make it through the fire. Is
Okay.
essentially what it is.
Yes. The breath is what holds you down.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes so much sense, because yeah, those the movements, when they go with the breath, like it's a different experience. Definitely you have to do it on your own and have the experience. So I would agree with that. I can't really explain. But it does, I love yoga. I would love to get more into it. If you ever have any classes online, let me know. I'll be down to join.
Yes.
And so did you want to go over the 8 limbs of yoga before we end the podcast for today?
Yeah, I can do them briefly because there's,
Just
again,
briefly.
so much information.
Oh my gosh, I know.
So, right, the 8 limbs of yoga is essentially what yoga is built upon. And each branch, when you practice them, is essentially designed to help you live a more disciplined life with this goal of alleviating suffering. So as we go through each branch, right, the first limb or branch is the yamas. And there's 5 of them. So that's yamas, yamas. There are 5 of these, but essentially yamas are like these restraints that you kind of have in your like daily practice. So they can be like truthfulness, non-violence, not stealing, non-excess, so like greediness, and non-possessiveness, so detaching yourself from like your preferences and the results of your efforts.
Yeah.
And then the second branch is the niyamas. So these are like the observances. So you start with the restraints, and then you start with what you're observing as you restrain. So these are like purity, contentment, the tapas, which is the self-discipline, the svadhyaya, which is self-study, like that can be where you're reading or journaling or just paying attention to things around you. Then the last one is surrender. So this is where you let everything that you observed, everything that you've restrained, you let it go. And then the third one is asana. So this is the one, it's like we skipped the first 2 limbs. The asana is the shape and the posture, right? Those are the physical practice. So like half the time we're skipping the first 2 limbs of yoga. So asanas help you. Asanas essentially like release the next 4 limbs of yoga. And the next one is pranayama, right? So that's the breath work. And asana and pranayama are kind of like, what do you call it? Maybe the same tier, right? They go together. And prana is Sanskrit for life force, right? So your breath is what means you're living. And then The sixth limb is dharana. So this is concentration. It's not the same thing as meditation. I just want to be clear. It's not the same thing. Concentration is where you're focused on what you're doing. So the next one, dhyana, is meditation, where you're trying to kind of just be focused on one pinpoint. So like dharana is where you're focused when you're doing asana and pranayama. And then dhyana is where like this whole practice just becomes this moving meditation where there's really like this nothingness going on. And then the last limb is samadhi, right? Which we're all very familiar with, which is this enlightenment where you're awakened. And it also translates to absorption. So it's where you're one with source, one with yourself, one with the divine, one with the earth, one with the universe, and everything about you is released. And you are in this just state of divinity. So as you practice, you kind of move through these 8 limbs.
I love it. Yeah. And people just skip over the first 2, like you said. People are they want to get to the samadhi, you know, everybody wants to get to samadhi, but nobody wants to do the other stuff because you're aligning your spirit with your physical being as well, right? And aligning all of you with, because source is not, you know, is living its experience through as you in this physical form. So that's beautiful. Yeah. Oh my God. I want to get into more of yoga now. Thank you for inspiring me.
Yes, good.
Oh my God. Now, would you let the people know, please, your social media handles, where they can find you, if you got anything coming up that they got to look out for?
Yes.
Let the people know.
Let the people know. Yeah, so my Instagram handle is Cinnamon Denise. So it's cinnamon, just like the spice, and then Denise, Denise. My TikTok handle is cinnamon_Denise. I'll tell you about the story behind what happened with that after. And then of course you can visit my website, which is cinnamondenise.com. But I have new music coming out soon, very soon, that I've produced and written, and it's all only females who have worked on this project. So I'm really excited about the feminine energy on this project. So look out for that.
Fuck yeah, I love it. Female empowerment. I love it so much. Yes. I can't wait to hear your music. I'm super excited for that. And I just want to say thank you for being on today. Thank you for sharing all of this wonderful, you know, knowledge that you have. I hope that it really did help somebody out there, and I'm sure it did. And I just want to say goodbye to everybody. Not watching, listening. Everyone listening. Infinite Souls podcast. I'll see you guys next Tuesday. Love you. Ciao.
Thank you.